Imagine waking up in a stone hut. No heat, no food, just frostbitten fingers and the smell of something dead outside your door. This is medieval winter, where starvation was a season, frostbite was a death sentence, and your only hope was to pray the wolves went after your neighbor first. Tonight, we're stepping into the coldest nightmare of history. Could you survive the medieval winter? Let me know in the comments how long you think you'd last. And if you like falling asleep to uncomfortable truths from the past, subscribe for more chilling history every week. You're lying in your warm bed right now, probably under soft blankets with central heating humming quietly in the background. But what if I told you that 600 years ago, on a night just like this one, a peasant family was huddled together in a single room, listening to the wind howl through gaps in their walls, knowing that the difference between warmth and death was measured in handfuls of straw and the body heat of their livestock. Tonight, you're going to discover how ordinary people survived the brutal medieval winters when a single cold snap could wipe out entire villages. You'll feel the sting of frost on bare skin, taste the smoky air of a dying fire, and understand why sharing your bed with a pig wasn't just acceptable, it was essential for survival. The year is 1347, and you're waking up in a small village somewhere in northern France. The sun hasn't risen yet, but you already know something's wrong. Your breath is visible in the air, inside your own home. The wooden walls around you are thin, hastily built from whatever timber your family could scavenge or afford. Between the planks, you can see slivers of grey dawn light, which means you can also feel every gust of wind that cuts across the frozen fields outside. Your feet hit the dirt floor, and the cold shoots up through your legs like lightning. This isn't the kind of cold that makes you reach for a sweater. This is the kind that makes your joints ache and your lungs burn with every breath. The fire in the center of your single room has died down to glowing embers, and you know that restarting it will require precious fuel. Fuel that has to last until spring, still months away. But here's what might surprise you. You're not panicking. Your family has survived winters like this before, using techniques passed down through generations of people who understood that nature wasn't something to conquer, but something to outsmart. And the first lesson in outsmarting winter was this: never waste body heat. You look around your small space, maybe 12 feet by 15 feet at most, and see your entire world compressed into one room. Your parents sleep on a raised platform made of wooden planks and stuffed with straw. Your younger siblings are curled up on smaller pallets near the walls. And there, in the corner where the air stays warmest, are the animals. A pig, maybe 2 chickens, and if your family is lucky, a goat. The pig snorts and shifts as you move around. To you, this might seem unsanitary, but in 1347, that pig is a living furnace. A healthy pig generates about as much heat as a small fireplace, and unlike a fire, it doesn't need constant feeding with precious wood or peat. The animal's body temperature runs warmer than yours, and throughout the night, its steady breathing and warmth have been keeping the worst of the cold at bay. Your mother is already awake. She's been listening to the wind all night, measuring its intensity, calculating how much fuel the family can afford to burn today. She moves quietly to the fire pit, which is nothing more than a circle of stones in the center of the room with a simple hole in the roof above to let smoke escape. Most of the heat goes straight up and out, but enough radiates sideways to make the difference between surviving and not. She adds a few pieces of carefully saved wood to the embers. Not logs. Your family can't afford real logs. These are twigs, bark, scraps of broken furniture, maybe some dried animal dung mixed with straw. Each piece has been hoarded like treasure because come February, when the winter truly bites down, even these scraps might mean the difference between life and death. But the real genius of medieval winter survival wasn't just about staying warm. It was about staying warm efficiently. And that's where the techniques get really interesting, because what your family is doing right now would seem completely foreign to you. Yet it's more sophisticated than most people realize. The straw scattered across the floor isn't just for the animals. It's insulation, trapping pockets of air that create a barrier between your feet and the frozen ground beneath. Your mother has laid it thick near the sleeping areas and thinner near the door, creating zones of warmth that correspond to how much time the family spends in each spot. It's primitive engineering, but it works. Your father pulls on his outer clothes, layers upon layers of rough wool and linen, but not in the way you might think. The innermost layer is actually loose, allowing air to circulate and trap warmth near his skin. The outer layers get progressively tighter, sealing that warm air in place. It's the same principle behind modern thermal wear, discovered through centuries of trial and error by people who couldn't afford to get it wrong. And here's the twist that changes everything about how you think medieval people lived. They weren't just surviving these winters. The smart ones were using the cold to their advantage in ways that would make a modern survivalist jealous. Because when the world around you becomes your enemy, you learn to make it your ally instead. Ready to find out how they turned winter from a death sentence into a tool for survival? You step outside into the pre-dawn darkness, and the cold hits you like a physical blow. But instead of rushing back inside, you do something that seems insane. You stand there for a moment, letting your body adjust. Your father taught you this trick. Shock your system awake all at once, rather than letting it slowly realize how cold it really is. The sharp intake of breath burns your lungs, but after 30 seconds, your body starts generating heat more efficiently. The village around you is still sleeping, but smoke rises from a few chimneys, thin gray ribbons against the dark sky. Each family is making the same calculation yours just made. How much fuel to burn, how much to save, how long this cold snap might last. But what you're seeing isn't desperation. It's a carefully orchestrated dance of survival that's been perfected over centuries. You walk toward the communal area where your family keeps their winter stores. And here's where the medieval approach to cold weather gets truly clever. That root cellar your grandfather dug isn't just for storing food, it's a thermal battery. 6 feet underground, the temperature stays constant at around 50 degrees, even when the surface is frozen solid. Your family has learned to use this space not just for turnips and preserved meat, but as a warming station. On the worst nights, when the wind is howling and the fire keeps dying, family members take turns going down into the root cellar for 10 or 15 minutes at a time. It feels like a tropical vacation compared to the house above. But more importantly, it prevents hypothermia from setting in gradually. You warm up your core temperature, then return to the main living space with enough heat stored in your body to last another hour or two. The foods stored down there tell their own story of winter survival. Barrels of pickled vegetables that took months to prepare. Wheels of cheese aged in the cool darkness. Dried strips of meat that your family made during the autumn slaughter, when keeping animals alive through winter became more expensive than preserving their meat. But the real treasure is the fat. Rendered pig fat, beef tallow, even goose fat if your family had a good year. That fat isn't just food. It's fuel, medicine, and protection all rolled into one. Rubbed into your skin, it creates a barrier against the wind that's more effective than any medieval clothing. Burned in small clay lamps, it provides light and heat that lasts longer than wood. Mixed with herbs, it becomes salve for the cracked skin and chilblains that plague everyone during the coldest months. Your ancestors understood something modern people have forgotten. In winter, fat is life. But here's what would really blow your mind about medieval winter survival. They weren't just enduring the cold, they were manipulating it. That pile of snow building up against the north wall of your house? That's not an accident. Your father spent weeks in late autumn banking earth and straw against the walls, creating deliberate snow traps that would form natural insulation barriers. Snow, it turns out, is an incredible insulator when it's trapped and compressed properly. The village layout itself is a masterpiece of cold weather engineering that most people never notice. Houses are clustered together, not spread out, creating windbreaks and shared warmth. The main paths between buildings follow the natural topography to minimize exposure to prevailing winds. Even the placement of doors and windows follows an ancient logic. Entrances face away from the direction winter storms typically approach, and the few windows are small and positioned to catch whatever winter sunlight is available. Your family's animals aren't just sharing your living space randomly either. That pig sleeping in the corner has been trained to stay in the warmest spot, where its body heat radiates most effectively throughout the room. The chickens roost on a perch positioned exactly where rising warm air from the fire will keep them comfortable, but not so close that they'll be harmed by smoke or sparks. It's a careful ecosystem where every living thing contributes to the survival of the whole. Now you understand why that pig isn't just livestock. It's a family member whose survival is directly tied to yours. And this relationship goes deeper than simple body heat. During the day, when you're working outside in the bitter cold, the pig is inside, breathing, moving around, keeping the air from becoming completely stagnant and frozen. When you return, numb and exhausted, you're coming back to a space that's been actively maintained at a livable temperature by a living, breathing heating system. The tools hanging on your walls reveal more secrets of medieval cold survival. That wooden shovel isn't just for mucking out animal stalls. It's specifically designed to move snow in ways that create insulation rather than just clearing paths. The leather strips hanging from pegs aren't just repairs waiting to happen. They're materials for quickly patching any gaps in walls or clothing that might let deadly drafts inside. Every item in your house has been chosen and positioned with winter survival in mind. But the most sophisticated part of your family's winter strategy is something you can't see: the social network that connects your household to every other family in the village. Because when the really bad storms hit, individual survival becomes impossible, and the entire community transforms into a single organism focused on keeping everyone alive until spring. Are you ready to discover how a medieval village could pool its resources to survive weather that would kill modern people in hours? The storm hits on a Tuesday morning in February, and within an hour, the world outside has become a white wall of death. The wind isn't just blowing, it's screaming, carrying snow horizontally across the village with such force that stepping outside would blind you instantly. This is the kind of weather that kills people in minutes, and your family knows it. But instead of panic, there's a strange calm settling over your house, because this is exactly what you've all been preparing for. Your father moves to the wooden chest near the door and pulls out a coil of rope. Thick, hand-woven rope that's been soaked in animal fat to keep it from freezing stiff. One end gets tied to a metal ring hammered into the wall beside your door. The other end disappears into his coat. This rope is your family's lifeline to the outside world, and more importantly, to the house next door where your neighbors are probably tying their own rope to their own wall right now. Within minutes, you hear it. 3 sharp knocks on your wall, coming from the direction of the adjacent house. Your father knocks back. 2 knocks, pause, 3 more. It's a code that every family in the village knows. A way of checking in when visibility drops to 0. The message is simple. We're alive, we're warm, we have fuel for at least another day. When the storm passes, we'll need to share resources with anyone who knocks differently, or doesn't knock at all. This is where medieval survival gets truly remarkable, because what's happening in your village right now is a coordinated response that would impress modern emergency management teams. Each family has spent months preparing not just for their own survival, but for the survival of the entire community. The old woman who lives alone 3 houses down has been taking her meals with different families throughout the winter, not out of charity, but as part of a calculated system that ensures no one faces the worst storms without backup support. Your mother opens the wooden box where your family keeps their emergency winter supplies, not food, but communication tools. Colored cloth strips that can be hung outside when the storm passes to signal different needs. Red for medical emergency, white for food shortage, blue for fuel shortage. A small brass bell that can carry farther than shouting when the wind dies down. And most importantly, a collection of small clay tokens, each one carved with the mark of a different family in the village. These tokens represent debts and credits in a complex winter economy that operates completely outside normal trade. Your family owes the miller's household 2 days of fuel because they shared their fire with you during the last blizzard. The blacksmith's family owes you a week's worth of food because your father helped repair their roof before the snows came. When spring arrives, these debts will be settled not with money, but with labor, goods, and favors that keep the entire community functioning. But the real genius of this system becomes clear when you understand how information travels through the village during storms like this. Every house is connected to the next by these rope systems, and messages can be passed from building to building without anyone leaving shelter. 3 tugs on the rope means I need help. 5 tugs means someone is sick. A specific rhythm that sounds almost like a heartbeat means fire is dying. Need fuel urgently. Right now, even though the storm is raging, your father is receiving a steady stream of information about the condition of every family in the village through this rope network. The baker's house, warm, well-stocked, no problems. The carpenter's family, struggling with a damaged chimney, but managing. The widow with 4 small children, low on fuel, but the family next to her is sharing their fire. It's like a medieval internet of survival data, transmitted through hemp rope and human touch. The animals in your house aren't just keeping you warm anymore, they're part of the communication system too. That pig in the corner has been trained to recognize different sounds and rhythms. When your father taps a specific pattern on the wooden floor, the pig grunts in response, and that grunt carries through the thin walls to the neighbors, confirming that your family's livestock are alive and healthy. It's a sound that means your house is still a functioning unit in the village's survival network. Your mother starts preparing what looks like a simple meal, but you recognize the ingredients: dried peas, preserved meat, herbs that have been carefully rationed since autumn. This isn't just dinner. It's a calculated nutritional response to extreme cold designed to maximize your body's heat production. The peas provide slow-burning energy, the meat delivers the fat your body needs to maintain core temperature, and the herbs contain compounds that improve circulation to your extremities. But she's making more than your family needs, and the extra portions aren't accidents. When the storm passes, and it will pass, your family will be ready to share these high-energy meals with anyone whose food supplies have been damaged or exhausted. Because in a medieval village, your neighbor's survival isn't just morally important, it's practically essential to your own long-term survival. The most stunning part of this entire system is something that wouldn't become clear until years later. These communities had developed winter survival strategies that were actually more effective than many modern approaches. The rope in your father's hands suddenly goes slack, and the silence that follows is more terrifying than the howling wind outside. The family 3 houses down, the one with the newborn baby, has stopped responding to the communication signals. In the modern world, you'd call 911. In 1347, you become 911. Your father doesn't hesitate. He pulls on his heaviest outer layer, wraps his face with cloth soaked in goose fat to prevent frostbite, and ties the rope around his waist. But he's not going alone. Within minutes, you hear movement from the houses on either side. The entire village has recognized the signal, and a rescue party is forming in conditions that would ground modern helicopters. They move from house to house using the rope network, each man taking turns at the front to break wind for the others. It's like watching a medieval version of mountain climbers roped together on Everest, except instead of ascending a peak, They're navigating horizontally through a white void where getting lost means certain death. The lead man keeps one hand on the rope, uses the other to probe ahead with a wooden staff, testing each step to make sure they're not walking off the edge of the village into open fields. What they find when they reach the silent house reveals both the brutality and the genius of medieval winter survival. The family inside is alive, but barely. Their fire has gone out completely, and the baby has begun showing the early signs of hypothermia. Blue-tinged lips, weak crying, skin that feels cold even through layers of cloth. In modern terms, this child has maybe an hour before irreversible damage begins. But your father and the other men have brought something more valuable than modern paramedics could offer: heated stones. While the rescue party was moving through the storm, their wives were back home, placing smooth river rocks directly into their fires, heating them until they glowed. These stones, wrapped in leather and cloth, hold heat for hours and can be safely placed against a hypothermic person's core to gradually warm them back to life. The unconscious woman is surrounded by these heated stones, one against her back, one at her feet, one pressed gently against her chest. The baby is placed skin to skin against his mother, with heated stones arranged around both of them, creating a warming cocoon that raises their body temperature slowly enough to avoid shock. It's a medical technique that won't be formally understood by doctors for another 600 years, but these peasants have mastered it through pure necessity. While the warming process begins, the men work to restore the family's fire using a technique that seems almost magical. They've brought small metal containers filled with glowing coals from their own hearths, medieval hand warmers that double as fire starters. But more importantly, they've brought dry tinder that's been kept in sealed containers all winter. Birch bark, pine needles, shavings from resinous wood, all perfectly preserved and ready to catch flame even in the dampest conditions. The fire comes back to life, and with it, hope. But this rescue isn't over. It's just beginning. Because saving this family means more than just getting them warm. It means integrating them back into the village's survival network, redistributing resources to make sure they can make it through the rest of winter without falling into crisis again. The men begin moving supplies from other houses, dried food from families with surplus, fuel from households that overestimated their needs, blankets and clothing from neighbors whose children have outgrown winter gear. It's not charity, it's investment. Every person who survives winter becomes a valuable resource when spring planting begins. Every death weakens the entire community's ability to thrive in the coming year. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about this rescue is what's happening back in the houses where the rescuers came from. The women and children left behind aren't just waiting. They're actively maintaining the survival network in their men's absence. Fires are being tended more carefully, food is being prepared for the returning rescuers, and most importantly, the rope communication system is being expanded to include the rescued family. By the time the storm passes 2 days later, that family with the sick baby has been fully integrated into a new survival arrangement. Their house becomes a secondary shelter for the village's children during the day, taking advantage of the extra heat generated by many small bodies in one space. In exchange, other families provide them with fuel and food, creating a symbiotic relationship that makes everyone more secure. The baby survives. More than that, he thrives, growing up to become one of the village's most skilled winter survival experts, passing on techniques that will keep his own children and grandchildren alive through storms that haven't even been born yet. His survival isn't just an individual victory, it's a victory for the entire knowledge base of medieval cold weather expertise. As spring finally arrives and you look back on that terrible winter, you realize something profound. Your ancestors weren't primitive people struggling helplessly against nature. They were sophisticated engineers of survival, masters of resource management, experts in community cooperation who had developed sustainable systems for living through conditions that would challenge even modern technology. Their techniques worked so well that many remote communities continued using them well into the 20th century, long after central heating and modern medicine became available in cities. Even today, wilderness survival experts study medieval winter strategies, recognizing that these ancient methods often outperform modern gear when resources are truly limited. The next time you adjust your thermostat or throw on an extra sweater, remember that pig in the corner of a medieval house, breathing quietly through the night, keeping a peasant family alive until spring with nothing but body heat and centuries of accumulated wisdom. Sometimes the simplest solutions are also the most brilliant, and sometimes survival isn't about conquering nature, it's about becoming part of it. Sweet dreams, and stay warm. The storm that tested your village becomes the storm that teaches it. In the weeks that follow, as the snow begins to melt and the first hints of spring appear in the lengthening days, your community doesn't just return to normal, it evolves. The lessons learned during those brutal February nights get woven into the fabric of village life, creating new traditions that will save lives for generations to come. That rope communication system, it becomes permanent. Even in mild weather, families maintain the connections between houses, using them to share information about weather patterns, coordinate work projects, and check on elderly neighbors. What started as an emergency measure becomes the foundation of a social network that makes the entire community more resilient, not just against winter, but against all the challenges rural life can throw at people. The heated stone technique spreads beyond emergency medicine. Village mothers discover that placing warm stones in children's beds prevents the respiratory illnesses that typically kill infants during cold snaps. Elderly villagers use them to maintain circulation in arthritic joints. Even healthy adults begin incorporating heated stones into their daily routines, finding that controlled warmth helps them work longer hours in cold conditions without exhausting their bodies. But the most profound change happens in how the village thinks about winter itself. Where once the cold season was seen as something to endure, it becomes something to collaborate with. Families begin timing their most important activities, repairs, crafts, storytelling, even courtship, to coincide with the long nights when everyone is gathered together around fires. Winter transforms from a period of mere survival into a season of intense community building and skill development. Your own family makes discoveries that seem small but prove revolutionary. That pig in the corner, the one that kept everyone warm through the worst nights? Your parents realize that its presence doesn't just provide heat, it creates better air quality. The animal's breathing helps circulate oxygen in the sealed space, preventing the carbon monoxide buildup that kills families who seal their homes too tightly against the cold. It's a biological air filtration system that works more reliably than any medieval technology. The root cellar becomes more than a food storage space and warming station. Your family begins using it as a workshop during the coldest months, crafting tools and repairing equipment in a space where fingers don't become too numb to work effectively. Other families copy this approach, and soon the village's underground spaces are humming with productive activity even in the deepest winter. What once was dead time becomes the season when next year's improvements get built. The fat-based preservation techniques your family perfected during that harsh winter revolutionize how the entire village approaches food security. Rendered animal fat becomes not just a cooking ingredient, but a preservation medium that extends the life of vegetables, meats, and even medicines far beyond what anyone thought possible. Families begin coordinating their autumn slaughters and preservation work, creating surplus supplies that can be traded with neighboring villages, bringing wealth and security to a community that once lived hand-to-mouth. Years pass, and you watch your younger siblings grow up with winter survival skills that would have been considered advanced techniques in your grandfather's time. They instinctively know how to read wind patterns to predict storm severity, how to arrange animal bedding for maximum heat efficiency, how to prepare foods that generate internal warmth. These aren't lessons they learn. They're skills they absorb simply by living in a community that has integrated centuries of cold weather wisdom into daily life. The village itself changes physically. New houses are built using the thermal engineering principles your community discovered through trial and error. Walls are designed with deliberate air gaps that trap insulating air. Roofs are angled to create snow dams that provide natural insulation. Windows are positioned to capture every possible minute of winter sunlight. What emerges is a settlement that looks medieval but functions with the efficiency of a modern passive solar design. But perhaps the most remarkable legacy of that terrible winter is what it teaches about human adaptability. Your ancestors weren't just surviving the cold, they were thriving in it, developing technologies and social systems that worked so well they remained virtually unchanged for centuries. They understood something that modern people often forget. The most sophisticated solutions are often the ones that work with natural systems rather than fighting against them. The baby who nearly died in that February storm grows up to become your village's master of winter survival. His children learn techniques that have been refined across generations, skills that blend practical engineering with deep understanding of human psychology and community dynamics. When harsh winters come again, and they always do, your village is ready with strategies that have been tested not just by one family or one season, but by decades of real-world experience. As you drift off to sleep in your warm modern bed, remember that your comfort rests on thousands of years of human ingenuity. Those medieval peasants, shivering in their one-room houses with pigs for heating systems, weren't primitive people struggling against impossible odds. They were your ancestors, and they were brilliant. They survived not just because they were tough, but because they were smart, cooperative, and endlessly creative in their approach to the fundamental challenge of staying alive. Their techniques worked so well that many survived into the modern era. Remote communities in Northern Europe and Asia continued using heated stones for medical treatment well into the 1900s. The rope communication systems evolved into the mountain rescue techniques still used today. The underground warming stations became the inspiration for modern earth-sheltered architecture. Even that pig-sharing approach lives on in the way modern off-grid communities arrange their homesteads for maximum thermal efficiency. So the next time winter winds howl outside your windows, take a moment to appreciate not just your central heating, but the countless generations of cold, determined people who figured out how to turn winter from an enemy into an ally. They're the reason you're here, warm and safe, drifting peacefully toward dreams that they earned for you with their ingenuity, one brutal winter night at a time. Sleep well. You've earned it too. The techniques that saved your medieval ancestors didn't disappear when modern heating arrived. They evolved, adapted, and quietly influenced the way humans approach survival challenges even today. That baby who survived hypothermia using heated stones grows old in a world where his village's winter wisdom has spread far beyond its original borders, carried by merchants, soldiers, and travelers who witnessed the remarkable resilience of communities that had mastered the art of collaborative survival. By the time he's an elderly man, telling stories to his own grandchildren, the innovations born from necessity in your village have become standard practices across Northern Europe. The rope communication systems are being used by alpine communities to coordinate during avalanches. The heated stone medical treatments are being refined by monastery physicians who recognize their effectiveness. The thermal engineering principles discovered through trial and error are being incorporated into the construction of castles and cathedrals. But the most lasting impact of medieval winter survival isn't technological, it's social. The communities that survived the worst winters were the ones that learned to pool resources, share knowledge, and treat individual survival as inseparable from community survival. This understanding shapes everything from trade agreements to marriage customs, creating social structures that prioritize collective resilience over individual accumulation of wealth. Modern archaeologists studying medieval village sites can identify the communities that mastered winter survival techniques by examining the physical remains they left behind. The houses are clustered in specific patterns that maximize shared warmth. The root cellars show evidence of year-round use as workshops and gathering spaces. The animal shelters are integrated with human living spaces in ways that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of thermal management. These aren't the remains of desperate people barely clinging to life. They're the artifacts of engineers who solved complex environmental challenges using nothing but observation, experimentation, and community cooperation. The psychological impact of mastering winter survival transforms how these communities approach all challenges. People who know they can keep each other alive through months of brutal cold develop a confidence and resourcefulness that carries over into every aspect of life. They become better farmers, more skilled craftspeople, more effective negotiators. The harsh winters that could have destroyed them instead forged them into some of the most capable and resilient communities in human history. As centuries pass, these winter survival techniques continue evolving. The heated stone treatments develop into early forms of physical therapy. The rope communication systems inspire the development of more sophisticated signaling methods. The community resource-sharing arrangements become models for early forms of insurance and social safety nets. What started as desperate improvisation during brutal winters becomes the foundation of innovations that improve human life in countless ways. Even today, when you look at modern survival training, wilderness medicine, and emergency management protocols, you can trace the lineage back to those medieval peasants huddled around their fires with pigs for heat sources. The principle of using body heat for medical treatment. The idea of community-wide resource pooling during emergencies. The recognition that the best survival strategies work with natural systems rather than against them. These aren't new concepts, they're ancient wisdom, refined across generations of people who couldn't afford to get it wrong. The villages that mastered these techniques often became the foundation of larger towns and eventually cities, their success attracting new residents who wanted to benefit from their proven approaches to handling environmental challenges. Some of these communities still exist today, their residents carrying forward traditions they might not even recognize as sophisticated survival technologies developed during medieval winters. So as you settle deeper into your comfortable bed tonight, warmed by technology that would seem like magic to your medieval ancestors, remember that your comfort exists because of their brilliance. They faced some of the harshest conditions humans have ever endured, and they didn't just survive, they thrived. They developed sustainable, replicable, improvable systems for turning environmental challenges into community strengths. Their legacy lives on not just in the survival techniques still taught by wilderness experts, but in the fundamental understanding that human survival and human cooperation are inseparable. The pig that warmed the peasant family, the rope that connected neighbor to neighbor, the heated stones that brought a baby back from the edge of death, these weren't just survival tools. They were symbols of a profound truth. We survive together, or we don't survive at all. That lesson, learned in the depths of medieval winters, remains as relevant today as it was 600 years ago. In a world facing new environmental challenges, the wisdom of people who learned to work with nature instead of fighting it offers hope and guidance. Their techniques remind us that the most sophisticated solutions are often the simplest ones, and that human ingenuity, combined with community cooperation, can overcome obstacles that seem impossible to face alone. Close your eyes now and dream of spring mornings in medieval villages, where families emerge from homes warmed by the breath of animals and the wisdom of ancestors, ready to plant new crops with hands that stayed strong through winter because they learned the secret of survival. It's not about conquering the cold, it's about dancing with it. Sweet dreams, and remember, you're the descendant of people who were brilliant enough to turn winter from a season of death into a season of community. That brilliance flows in your veins, waiting for whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. The knowledge that kept medieval peasants alive through impossible winters didn't vanish with the arrival of modern conveniences. It went underground, preserved in remote communities, survival manuals, and the collective memory of cultures that understood winter as both teacher and testing ground. Today, when power grids fail during ice storms and modern heating systems prove fragile against extreme weather, emergency responders rediscover techniques that medieval families used as naturally as breathing. In northern Alaska, indigenous communities still use versions of the heated stone treatments your medieval ancestors perfected. When hypothermia threatens, warm rocks wrapped in animal skins provide controlled, sustained heat that modern electric blankets can't match when electricity fails. Search and rescue teams in mountain regions employ rope communication systems that trace their lineage directly back to the networks medieval villages used to stay connected during blizzards. The community resource sharing arrangements that kept entire villages alive through brutal winters evolved into modern mutual aid societies, insurance cooperatives, and emergency response networks. The psychological understanding that individual survival depends on community survival became the foundation of public health systems, disaster preparedness protocols, and social safety nets that protect millions of people today. But perhaps the most profound legacy of medieval winter survival is something subtler: the recognition that human beings are not separate from nature, but part of it. Those peasants who shared their homes with pigs understood something that modern people often forget. We survive by integrating our needs with the natural systems around us, not by trying to dominate or ignore them. When climate scientists today talk about sustainable living and resilient communities, they're describing approaches that would have been instantly familiar to medieval families who learned to read weather patterns in their animals' behavior, who understood that waste heat from any source could mean the difference between life and death, who knew that the survival of the weakest members strengthened the entire group. Modern passive house design, with its emphasis on thermal mass, controlled ventilation, and minimal energy consumption, recreates principles that medieval builders discovered through necessity. Contemporary permaculture practices, which integrate animals and plants in mutually beneficial arrangements, echo the wisdom of peasant families who understood that their pig was not just livestock but a partner in survival. Even modern medical understanding of hypothermia treatment, the emphasis on gradual rewarming, the use of external heat sources, the recognition that community care often works better than individual treatment, validates techniques that medieval communities developed through centuries of keeping each other alive through the coldest nights. As you drift towards sleep tonight, wrapped in the warmth that modern technology provides, remember that this comfort rests on a foundation built by people who faced winter with nothing but their intelligence, their community bonds, and their willingness to learn from both success and failure. They didn't just survive the cold. They transformed it into a teacher that made them more resourceful, more cooperative, and more deeply connected to the natural world than most modern people can imagine. Their legacy whispers in every technique used by modern survivalists, every community emergency plan, every recognition that human resilience comes not from individual strength but from the wisdom of working together. That pig breathing quietly in the corner of a medieval house, that rope stretched between neighbors' doors, that heated stone pressed against a child's chest. These weren't just survival tools. They were symbols of humanity's greatest strength: the ability to turn adversity into innovation, isolation into community, and the harsh lessons of winter into the warm wisdom of spring. Sleep well, descendant of winter survivors, and dream of the strength that flows through your veins. Strength earned not through conquest, but through cooperation, not through domination of nature, but through partnership with it. You are here because they learned to dance with winter instead of fighting it. And that dance continues in every act of human kindness, every moment of community cooperation, every recognition that we are all in this together. The coldest nights taught them the warmest truths, and those truths live on in you. Rest now, and let their hard-won wisdom warm your dreams. The ripples of winter wisdom spread far beyond your village in ways that would reshape medieval society entirely. When the Black Death arrives just months after that brutal winter, The communities that learned to share resources and coordinate survival efforts prove remarkably resistant to the plague's devastation. The same communication networks that carried messages through blizzards now carry early warnings about disease outbreaks. The same resource-sharing systems that kept families fed through winter become distribution networks for herbal medicines and quarantine supplies. Your village loses only 3 people to the plague, a mortality rate so low that chroniclers from distant regions make special trips to study what they call the miracle village. But you know it's not a miracle. It's the direct result of winter survival techniques that taught your community to treat individual health as inseparable from collective health, to respond to crisis with coordination rather than panic, to view challenges as problems to be solved rather than disasters to be endured. The heated stone techniques developed for treating hypothermia prove remarkably effective against plague symptoms. Controlled heat application helps patients maintain circulation when fever damages their cardiovascular systems. The heated stones, wrapped in cloth treated with rendered animal fat and medicinal herbs, create localized treatment environments that help the body fight infection. Medieval physicians who visit your village begin documenting these techniques, spreading them to other communities facing the plague. But the most crucial advantage your village has isn't medical, it's social. The winters taught your people to isolate sick individuals without abandoning them, to maintain supply lines to quarantined households, to coordinate community responses without descending into chaos. When plague spreads through contact, these skills prove more valuable than any medicine. Families know how to seal their homes effectively while maintaining communication with neighbors. The rope networks between houses allow for resource delivery without direct contact. The economic systems that emerged from winter survival create another unexpected advantage. Because your village learned to value collective survival over individual accumulation, there's no hoarding when plague threatens food supplies. The resource-sharing networks that distributed fuel during blizzards seamlessly adapt to distribute medicine, food, and essential supplies during quarantine periods. Where other communities fragment under the stress of epidemic disease, yours grows stronger. The animals integrated into your winter survival systems become early warning systems for plague transmission. Those pigs and chickens living in close proximity to humans show symptoms of illness days before human cases appear, giving families time to implement quarantine measures before infection spreads. What started as a heating solution becomes a sophisticated biological monitoring system that helps the village track and contain disease outbreaks. Your neighbors who survived that February storm using heated stones and community coordination become the village's plague response leaders. They understand, from personal experience, how quickly life-threatening conditions can escalate and how effective coordinated community action can be in reversing them. The same calm competence that guided the winter rescue operation now guides plague response efforts. The village's approach to plague containment spreads to neighboring settlements, carried by survivors who witnessed its effectiveness. Within a few years, the thermal treatment techniques, community coordination methods, and resource-sharing systems developed during brutal winters are being adapted for plague response across northern France. What started as desperate improvisation during medieval cold snaps becomes a comprehensive public health methodology. The psychological resilience developed through winter survival proves equally valuable during plague years. People who know they can keep each other alive through months of environmental challenge don't panic when faced with disease outbreaks. They respond with the same methodical problem-solving approach they use for winter preparedness. Assess resources, coordinate response, adapt techniques as needed, maintain communication, prioritize collective survival. Years later, when the plague has passed and your village has not only survived but grown in size and prosperity, visiting merchants and nobles marvel at the community's resilience and sophistication. They see well-constructed houses with integrated animal shelters, underground storage and workshop systems, sophisticated communication networks, and social structures that prioritize mutual aid and collective security. What they don't see is that all of this emerged from the simple necessity of staying warm on cold nights. The techniques that saved your ancestors during winter become the foundation of innovations that improve human life across multiple domains: medicine, architecture, social organization, resource management, and community planning. The heated stones evolve into sophisticated thermal therapy systems. The rope networks inspire the development of early telecommunications concepts. The resource-sharing arrangements become models for cooperative economics that influence trade and governance across the region. But perhaps the most profound impact is philosophical. Communities that mastered winter survival developed a fundamentally different relationship with environmental challenge and social cooperation. They understood that human prosperity doesn't come from conquering nature, but from finding ways to work with natural systems. They recognized that individual success without community resilience is ultimately meaningless. They discovered that the best solutions to complex problems often involve simple technologies applied with sophisticated understanding. These insights, born from the necessity of surviving cold nights with nothing but pigs for heat and stones for medicine, continue to influence human development in ways that extend far beyond their original context. The knowledge spreading from your village reaches the ears of monks copying manuscripts in distant monasteries, who begin documenting winter survival techniques alongside religious texts. These monastic records preserve detailed descriptions of thermal therapy, community resource management, and integrated animal husbandry systems that would have been lost forever if left to oral tradition alone. The same scribes who record prayers and philosophical treatises now carefully document the exact temperatures needed to heat stones for medical treatment, the proper ratios of animal fat to plant materials for weatherproofing compounds, and the mathematical principles behind efficient heat distribution in small spaces. These manuscripts travel along trade routes that connect northern France to the rest of medieval Europe, carrying winter survival wisdom to regions that have struggled for generations with cold weather challenges. Alpine communities in what will become Switzerland adopt the rope communication systems, adapting them for use during avalanches and mountain storms. Scandinavian settlements integrate the heated stone techniques into their existing winter traditions, creating hybrid approaches that prove more effective than either system alone. The economic implications of these spreading techniques reshape medieval commerce entirely. Villages that master winter survival become reliable year-round trading partners because merchants know they can count on these communities to remain functional even during the harshest seasons. Trade routes begin deliberately routing through settlements known for their winter resilience, creating economic advantages that compound over generations. Your village becomes a regional hub not because of any natural resources, but because of human-developed knowledge that makes it a stable partner in an unstable world. The architectural innovations born from winter survival necessity begin appearing in the construction of larger buildings, manor houses, monasteries, and eventually early castles. The thermal engineering principles discovered by peasant families trying to keep warm get incorporated into structures designed to house dozens or hundreds of people. The underground workshop concepts evolve into the sophisticated basement systems of medieval strongholds. The integrated animal shelter designs influence the layout of monastery complexes where monks raise livestock alongside their religious duties. But the most far-reaching impact involves military strategy and governance. Lords and kings begin to understand that territories with effective winter survival systems are far more valuable than regions with abundant resources but fragile communities. The social coordination techniques that kept villages alive through blizzards prove equally valuable for organizing defense against raiders, coordinating agricultural efforts across large territories, and maintaining loyalty during political upheavals. Your village's approach to shared decision-making during crisis situations influences the development of early democratic institutions in northern European regions. The recognition that survival depends on everyone's contribution, not just the contributions of the wealthy or powerful, gradually erodes traditional hierarchical structures. Communities that learned to treat the village pigkeeper as an essential expert in thermal management begin questioning why agricultural knowledge should be valued less than noble bloodlines in other contexts. The medical knowledge emerging from winter survival spreads through networks of traveling physicians, midwives, and herbalists who recognize the effectiveness of treatments developed through practical necessity. University scholars begin studying thermal therapy techniques that originated in peasant houses, attempting to understand the scientific principles behind methods that clearly work despite having no theoretical foundation in classical medical texts. Women who mastered the preparation of fat-based medicines and thermal treatments during winter survival efforts become recognized experts whose knowledge is sought across regional boundaries. The gender dynamics of medieval society begin shifting as communities recognize that survival expertise transcends traditional social roles. The woman who knows how to render fat into effective medicine, or how to coordinate community resources during emergencies, gains authority that traditional noble titles can't match. The children who grew up in your village, learning winter survival as naturally as walking and talking, carry these skills into adult roles that spread their influence across medieval society. They become merchants who understand resource management, soldiers who excel at logistics and coordination, craftspeople who integrate thermal efficiency into their work, and parents who teach the next generation to view challenges as opportunities for innovation rather than obstacles to be endured. The techniques that started with a single family sharing their living space with a pig to stay warm ultimately influenced the development of sustainable agriculture, cooperative economics, democratic governance, evidence-based medicine, and integrated architectural design across medieval Europe. The ripple effects continue expanding for centuries, shaping human development in ways that extend far beyond their original winter survival context. Your ancestors didn't just learn to survive cold nights. They accidentally invented approaches to human cooperation and environmental adaptation that would influence civilization for generations. The pig in the corner, the rope between houses, the heated stones wrapped in leather. These simple tools became the foundation of innovations that made human communities more resilient, more equitable, and more capable of thriving in challenging environments. Today, when urban planners design sustainable communities, when emergency responders coordinate disaster relief efforts, when medical professionals treat hypothermia, when architects create energy-efficient buildings, they're using principles that trace their lineage back to medieval peasants who figured out how to turn winter from an enemy into a teacher. The next time you feel warm and secure in your modern home, remember that your comfort rests on centuries of accumulated wisdom earned by people who faced the cold with nothing but intelligence, community spirit, and the determination to find solutions that worked. They succeeded so completely that their techniques became invisible, woven into the fabric of human knowledge so thoroughly that we've forgotten their origins. But they're still there, those winter survival innovations, still keeping us alive in ways both obvious and subtle, still teaching us that the best solutions emerge not from fighting against natural challenges, but from learning to dance with them. The transformation accelerates as winter survival knowledge reaches the highest levels of medieval society. When Eleanor of Aquitaine's court physicians begin documenting thermal therapy techniques in the 1170s, they're recording methods that originated in peasant houses decades earlier. The heated stone treatments that saved hypothermic children become sophisticated protocols for treating noble patients suffering from winter ailments. The resource coordination systems that kept village families alive evolve into the administrative methods used to manage vast feudal territories. The architectural innovations spread upward through the social hierarchy with remarkable speed. Castle builders begin incorporating the thermal engineering principles discovered by families trying to heat single rooms efficiently. The great halls of manor houses start featuring integrated animal quarters that provide supplemental heating, disguised as decorative elements but functionally identical to the pig corners of peasant homes. Underground storage and workshop systems become the foundation of castle design, creating secure spaces that maintain stable temperatures year-round. But perhaps the most remarkable development is how winter survival techniques influenced medieval warfare and diplomacy. Military commanders discover that armies using peasant-developed winter survival methods can campaign through seasons that would devastate forces relying on traditional approaches. Soldiers trained in community resource sharing prove more effective at maintaining supply lines and unit cohesion. The communication techniques developed for coordinating village survival efforts become the basis for battlefield signaling systems. The economic systems that emerged from shared winter survival create new models for international trade and political alliance. Regions known for their winter resilience become preferred trading partners and military allies because their stability can be counted on regardless of environmental conditions. The social technologies that kept villages alive through brutal cold become diplomatic tools for managing relationships between kingdoms and territories. Your descendants, now scattered across medieval Europe through marriage and migration, carry winter survival knowledge into completely different contexts. A great-granddaughter who learned thermal management in your village's integrated animal shelters becomes a monastery administrator who revolutionizes how religious communities heat their buildings and care for sick members. A great-grandson who mastered rope communication systems becomes a master craftsman whose construction techniques make buildings more resilient and efficient. The knowledge continues evolving, adapting to new challenges and opportunities. The heated stone techniques develop into early forms of physical therapy that help injured soldiers and laborers recover more quickly. The community coordination methods become models for guild organization and early forms of representative government. The resource management systems influence the development of banking and insurance institutions that help communities prepare for future challenges. By the 13th century, winter survival innovations that began in your village have become so thoroughly integrated into medieval society that their origins are largely forgotten. The sophisticated thermal engineering in Gothic cathedrals incorporates principles discovered by peasants trying to keep single rooms warm. The administrative systems that manage complex political territories use coordination methods developed for sharing resources during blizzards. The medical treatments taught in university medical schools include techniques that originated in desperate attempts to treat hypothermia using heated stones and animal fat. The psychological and social impacts prove even more profound than the technological ones. Communities that mastered winter survival developed fundamentally different approaches to leadership, resource distribution, and collective decision-making. These approaches gradually influenced broader medieval society, contributing to the development of more democratic institutions, more equitable economic systems, and more sophisticated understanding of how human communities can thrive in challenging environments. The children who grew up learning winter survival as a natural part of life become adults who approach all challenges with the same methodical problem-solving approach. Assess available resources, coordinate community response, adapt techniques based on results, maintain communication systems, prioritize collective success over individual advantage. These habits of mind influence everything from agricultural innovation to artistic creativity to scholarly investigation. As the medieval period draws to a close and transforms into the Renaissance, the foundation of knowledge and social organization built on winter survival techniques becomes the launching point for even greater innovations. The communities that learn to thrive during the coldest months become the communities best positioned to take advantage of new opportunities for trade, exploration, and technological development. Your ancestors' simple solution to staying warm on brutal winter nights, sharing space with animals, heating stones in fires, connecting houses with ropes, coordinating resources across communities, ultimately helped create the social, economic, and technological foundations of modern European civilization. The pig that breathed quietly in the corner of a medieval peasant house didn't just keep one family warm through one cold night. It became part of a chain of innovations that helped humanity learn to transform environmental challenges into opportunities for advancement. That legacy continues today in every community that prioritizes mutual aid over individual accumulation, In every building designed to work with natural systems rather than fight against them. In every recognition that human survival and human cooperation are inseparable. The winter survival techniques developed by your ancestors remain relevant not as historical curiosities, but as practical wisdom for creating resilient, sustainable, thriving human communities in any era. The coldest nights taught them the warmest truths about human nature, community cooperation, and our relationship with the natural world. Those truths remain as valuable today as they were 6 centuries ago, waiting to be rediscovered by anyone willing to learn from the remarkable ingenuity of people who refused to let winter defeat them. The transformation that began with peasants sharing their homes with pigs reaches its ultimate expression when Marco Polo returns from his eastern travels in 1295, carrying descriptions of Chinese winter survival techniques that prove remarkably similar to methods developed independently in European villages. The convergent evolution of human survival wisdom across different continents validates what your ancestors discovered through necessity. There are optimal solutions to the challenge of staying alive in extreme cold, and human communities will inevitably discover them when survival depends on getting it right. Chinese heated stone techniques, Mongolian community coordination systems, and Siberian thermal engineering principles all echo the innovations that emerged from European winter survival needs. But what makes the European development unique is how completely these survival techniques became integrated into the social and economic fabric of medieval civilization. Where other cultures used winter survival methods seasonally, European communities used them as the foundation for year-round approaches to cooperation, resource management, and community building. By the 14th century, the ripple effects of winter survival innovation have created a completely different type of human society across Northern Europe. Communities that learned to share resources during blizzards have developed economic systems based on mutual aid rather than pure competition. Villages that mastered thermal engineering for survival have created architectural traditions that influence the design of churches, castles, and entire cities. Regions that developed sophisticated communication networks for coordinating winter survival have become the foundation of political systems that emphasize collective decision-making and shared responsibility. The knowledge systems that preserved and transmitted winter survival techniques become the models for how other types of practical knowledge get developed and shared. Monastic scriptoriums that documented thermal therapy methods establish patterns for recording and disseminating technical knowledge that will eventually contribute to the development of modern scientific methodology. Guild systems that grew from craft techniques influenced by winter survival innovations create educational and economic structures that bridge the gap between medieval and Renaissance society. But perhaps the most profound legacy of medieval winter survival is something that can't be measured in technologies or institutions. The psychological understanding that human beings are most successful when they work with natural systems rather than against them, when they prioritize collective thriving over individual advantage, and when they view environmental challenges as opportunities for innovation rather than obstacles to be overcome. This understanding, born from the desperate necessity of staying warm through brutal medieval winters, continues to influence human development in ways both obvious and subtle. Every modern building designed for energy efficiency incorporates thermal principles discovered by peasants trying to heat single rooms with minimal fuel. Every emergency response protocol reflects coordination techniques developed by villages trying to keep everyone alive through seasonal crises. Every recognition that community resilience creates individual security echoes the hard-won wisdom of people who learned that sharing their homes with pigs wasn't just practical. It was the foundation of a completely different way of understanding what it means to be human in a challenging world. Your ancestors didn't just survive the coldest nights in medieval history. They used those nights as teachers, learning lessons about cooperation, innovation, and sustainability that helped create the foundation of modern civilization. The pig in the corner, the rope between houses, the heated stones wrapped in cloth. These weren't just survival tools. They were symbols of humanity's greatest discovery, that we thrive not by conquering our environment, but by becoming part of it, not by competing with each other, but by recognizing that individual success and collective success are inseparable. That discovery, earned through centuries of cold nights and hard choices, remains as relevant today as it was 600 years ago. In a world facing new environmental challenges, the wisdom of people who learn to dance with winter instead of fighting it offers both hope and practical guidance for creating human communities that can not just survive, but truly flourish, no matter what challenges tomorrow might bring. The warmth you feel tonight, in your comfortable modern home, carries within it the accumulated wisdom of countless generations who refused to let the cold defeat them. They succeeded so completely that their victory became invisible, woven into the fabric of human knowledge and social organization so thoroughly that we've forgotten to marvel at their achievement. But it's still there, that winter wisdom, still keeping us alive and helping us thrive, still teaching us that the most sophisticated solutions are often the simplest ones, and that human ingenuity combined with community cooperation can transform any challenge into an opportunity for advancement. The coldest nights taught them the warmest truths, and those truths live on in every act of mutual aid, every sustainable innovation, and every recognition that we are all in this together. The knowledge that transformed your medieval village ultimately transcends its origins entirely, becoming the invisible foundation of human progress that extends far beyond winter survival. By the time the Renaissance arrives, the innovations that began with families sharing their homes with pigs have become so thoroughly integrated into European civilization that their peasant origins are completely forgotten. University scholars studying thermal dynamics don't realize they're refining principles discovered by desperate families trying to stay warm. Political theorists developing concepts of democratic governance don't know they're building on social coordination techniques that emerged from village-wide efforts to survive blizzards. The children who grew up in your village, learning winter survival as naturally as breathing, become the grandparents and great-grandparents of the generation that will create the modern world. Their descendants include the architects who designed the great Renaissance buildings with their sophisticated understanding of thermal engineering, the explorers who survive Arctic expeditions using techniques refined from medieval winter survival methods, the physicians who revolutionize medical treatment using heating and community care approaches that trace their lineage back to heated stones and village-wide plague response. Leonardo da Vinci's designs for heating systems incorporate principles that would have been instantly familiar to the peasant families who learned to manage heat distribution in single-room houses. Machiavelli's political theories reflect understanding of community coordination and resource management that echo the techniques villages used to survive environmental crises. The social structures that enable Renaissance art, science, and exploration rest on foundations of cooperation and mutual aid that were forged during the coldest nights of medieval winters. But the most remarkable achievement of medieval winter survival knowledge isn't any single innovation or institution. It's how completely it changed human understanding of what's possible when communities commit to collective survival and shared innovation. The transformation that began with practical necessity, staying warm enough to live through the night, ultimately created new ways of thinking about human potential, environmental adaptation, and social organization that continue to influence how we approach challenges today. When modern urban planners design sustainable communities, they're applying principles of resource sharing and thermal efficiency that trace their origins to medieval villages that learned to pool heating fuel and coordinate winter survival efforts. When emergency responders coordinate disaster relief, they're using communication and resource distribution methods that evolved from the rope networks and shared supply systems that kept villages alive through blizzards. When medical professionals treat hypothermia, they're using graduated warming techniques that were perfected by peasant families using heated stones to save children from freezing to death. The psychological legacy proves even more profound than the technical innovations. Communities that mastered winter survival developed unshakable confidence in human ingenuity and cooperation. They understood, from direct experience, that the most impossible seeming challenges can be solved when people work together intelligently and persistently. This confidence became the foundation of the optimism and innovation that characterizes the best of European civilization. The belief that human communities can adapt to any environment, overcome any obstacle, and create prosperity even in the most challenging circumstances. Your ancestors' achievement wasn't just surviving brutal winters, it was discovering that survival challenges could become opportunities for advancement, that environmental pressures could spark innovation, and that the techniques developed for staying alive could become the foundation for thriving. They proved that human beings don't have to be victims of their circumstances. With intelligence, cooperation, and persistence, any community can transform the forces that threaten to destroy it into the forces that help it grow stronger. This understanding, earned through countless cold nights and hard-won victories, remains as valuable today as it was 6 centuries ago. In a world facing environmental challenges that seem overwhelming, the wisdom of people who learned to turn winter from an enemy into a teacher offers both inspiration and practical guidance. They remind us that the most sophisticated solutions often involve simple technologies applied with deep understanding of natural systems and community dynamics. They demonstrate that individual success and collective success are inseparable. They prove that human ingenuity, combined with community cooperation, can overcome obstacles that seem insurmountable. The pig that shared a medieval peasant's home, breathing quietly through the night and keeping a family warm until spring, represents something far larger than winter survival. It represents humanity's greatest achievement, learning to work with the world rather than against it, to find strength in cooperation rather than competition, and to transform every challenge into an opportunity for growth. That pig, and the knowledge that surrounded it, helped create the world you live in today. A world where warmth and security are possible not because we've conquered nature, but because we've learned to dance with it. The coldest nights taught them the warmest truths about human nature, and those truths continue to warm us still, lighting the way toward communities that are more resilient, more equitable, and more capable of thriving no matter what challenges tomorrow might bring. The legacy of medieval winter survival lives on in every act of mutual aid, every sustainable innovation, and every recognition that we are strongest when we face the future together. And yet, they endured. Somehow, in the freezing dark, with frost-bitten limbs and hollow stomachs, people made it through. Not because they were stronger, but because they had no choice. No central heating. No supermarkets. No second chances. Just grit, prayer, and the hope that spring would come before death did. So the next time winter rolls in, and you're wrapped in blankets, scrolling your phone, spare a thought for those who didn't have warmth, or food, or time. If you made it this far, you've already survived more than most. Tell me in the comments, how long do you think you would have lasted? And if you want more forgotten truths from the cold corners of history, subscribe and join us again, next time, before you sleep.